Namaste and welcome to Urban Chatterati. This is Abhinav Prakash. And today I have with me Gautam Chikarmaniji, Vice President of Observer Research Foundation, to talk about India's 5G policy, China, and the economic rivalry between India and China. So, Gautamji, welcome to the show.
Namaste. Glad to be here.
Thank you, sir. So, sir, when we start with the 5G topic, the first thing is that what is the benefit of 5G for India's economy in the future? What exactly are we looking at in the terms of economic gain, efficiency gain, connectivity, and so on?
I think there is no direct correlation between 5G and economy. At the same, it's like you should look at 5G as a platform. Yesterday's platforms were roads. Before that, there were rivers and seas, highways. Tomorrow's platforms are going to be digital. To that extent, even 2G, 3G, 4G, which India is on now, is a platform change. The economic activities which these platforms support are more or less the same. But like in the case of the highways, there was some form of a death of distance in terms of time. With super highways, with these digital highways, it will become even more. And this entire distance, geography, ideas, innovation, disruptions, the way you organize your supply chains, the kind of products you sell, the kind of services you offer, those are the kind of changes that a digital infrastructure, including 5G, will bring. In particular, 5G, because of the high speeds, it's 100 times more than 4G, it allows you for an always-on government, always-on companies. It allows for highly mobile consumers and citizens, because the mobility is now, you're holding that mobility in your phone. And it allows for fully connected societies, as we are seeing that's going on in the current COVID problem, the kind of helplines that have opened up, the kind of people, the outreach at the citizen level that is happening in conjunction with what's happening with companies and corporations. So that is what 5G allows. In addition to this, 5G will enable what is known as the fourth industrial revolution. It will accentuate the Internet of Things. It will power smart cities, smart homes. It will power autonomous vehicles, which are known as self-driven cars, for instance. Healthcare from a distance, a 5G pipeline will be able to enable at a much faster and a more efficient manner. Climate smart agriculture. So there's a whole list of things that it will speed up. For instance, distance healthcare, which today is a little difficult, will become possible along with 5G. So there are many advantages of a 5G, and I'm glad that India has begun the trials, and I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, great. So we are also looking forward to what 5G will mean for lay consumers like us. But when we talk about India's 5G policy, what are the main features of India's 5G policy, and especially why did we kept Chinese out?
The main components of India's 5G will not be different from those in China or US or Germany or Sweden. The technology is the same. Why we kept China out is a very, very important issue. And I don't think it relates to technology as such, as much as it relates to the intent behind the technology offered by Chinese companies. Now, this is although the line is very simple, but there are many layers to this. The technology, as you know, is very fast, very complex, but it also allows for a lot of intrusion. In the process of that transformation, the kind of and speed, the manner in which this technology enters the various parts of what it attempts to enable is equally complex. Now, if Chinese equipment is used, there is a whole lot of data. Let me just give you an example. When you talk about, let's say, autonomous vehicles, is essentially a car which has a computer system that is linked to a cloud, and which the cloud tells you that this road is empty, that road is empty, there's a car coming from here, there's a pedestrian there, etc. So the system of this car using 5G engages with the cloud and helps you navigate, helps not you, you are just sitting there, helps the autonomous vehicle navigate from point A to point B. There are a million such self-driven cars. Now imagine this. All of them are navigating through clouds, talking with the cloud, with the road, and also the other vehicles. So it's that kind of complex technology. Now, China, if it has access to this technology, and if we are using Huawei, for instance, has the potential to distort these signals. Can you imagine the kind of havoc that this can put? Now you will ask me, why will Huawei do this? And why not Samsung or why not Ericsson, right? That's the question in your mind right now. It is because, and this is where the complexity of this technology geopolitics comes into play. China is a hostile nation. It has gone out of its way to tell us and the world that it doesn't seek friendship with India. China is at war with itself, and hence it at war with almost every neighbor around it. The South China Sea, there's a rivalry with Russia, Philippine Island, this entire Thailand problem, Indonesia, now it's entering Indonesian waters, India. The only two friends that I think it has, the two brothers, so to speak, are North Korea and Pakistan, both of which are failing and rogue states. In fact, in the process, China is adapting and becoming a rogue state in itself. We can have a separate discussion on this later. But it has proved beyond doubt that it does not seek friendship with India. It treats India with contempt. It supports terrorism in order to belittle India. At United Nations, it keeps on undermining it. So that is one aspect of it. The second aspect is that in 2017, Xi Jinping came out with a new law called the National Intelligence Law. There are 4 articles in that law, Article 7, 9, 12, and 14, which effectively turn every Chinese entity, be it a citizen, a corporation, an organization, anybody, into a spy. Let me just read, just give me a minute. I'll just read it. I wrote this paper in 2019. I'll just read out those 4 articles. Article 7. All organizations and citizens shall support, assist, and cooperate with national intelligence efforts in accordance with law and shall protect national intelligence secrets they are aware of. This is a law. In other words, all Chinese companies and individuals are bound by law to support China's intelligence agencies. Not that they wish to, but they're bound by law. There's a difference. There are many Indians outside. Some of them may be indulging in some nefarious activities, who knows? But to be forced to do so through a law is the difference. Even so also with American companies or any other companies. I'm quite secular over here. Article 9. The state gives commendations and awards to individuals and organizations that make major contributions to national intelligence efforts. So that's the carrot. First was the stick, now is the carrot. Article 12. In accordance with relevant state provisions, national intelligence work institutions may establish cooperative relationships with relevant individuals and organizations and retain them to carry out related work. This is slightly complex. I won't get into it. Article 40. National intelligence work institutions carrying out intelligence efforts may request that relevant organs, organizations, and citizens provide necessary support, assistance, and cooperation. So by law, the Chinese people, the Chinese companies, the Chinese organizations, anything to do with China are compelled to extract, to work with intelligence agencies and help establish that. This is by law. Now imagine Huawei. Firstly, it has PLA connections, which it denies, but the whole world has talked about its PLA connections. Secondly, let us assume it is pure as water or as a milk. But even then, it is bound by the law of the land to intrude, to be a spy, to capture intelligence efforts. So now if 5G is used by the Indian army or by the bureaucracy or by the government or by large corporations, you can imagine the kind of information that they will be able to gather close, block the disinformation campaigns that they will be able to run. That is the danger. Your next question, I can already read in your head. Why will South Korean companies not do this?
Yes.
Why will Finnish companies not do this? Why will a Swedish company not do this? They may. But the difference here is, if I have some problem with a company, let us say a Swedish company, there is an independent judiciary there. There are equality of values of two democracies conversing with one another. An independent judiciary will ensure that the protections are given to me. It will be brought to book. There will be very little, they will not be able to get away the way Chinese state itself will do, or can potentially do, with a series of laws and regulations with a company like Huawei. So I think you need to examine this in the totality. It's not just one thing. Huawei is not bad. It's on the cutting edge of tech. It has the maximum patents in 5G. So as technology, you cannot question Huawei. It's possibly number one, although there are people who say it's not, and they're trying to reduce. And I'm not a technology person per se, but I'm just telling you what the debates are. So they have the maximum number of patents. They are on the cutting edge. They are the cheapest. Why will you not use it? Because cheap comes at a price when you are dealing with China.
Yes, exactly. And also, when we talk about the other countries like Sweden and Korea, in their own home country, there is this entire framework of privacy, which puts no restrictions on the companies or not to indulge in such a thing, which is completely opposite to what we have in China. So of course,
that's a surveillance state versus a freedom that the Constitution grants to all democratic nations. Good point.
But we are seeing of late a pushback from India against China on the economic front. We have seen them banning the TikTok app, which became quite symbolic of India's pushback against China's digital colonization. But even keeping aside the digital aspect, if you look at economic data, the trade between India and China, it looks like that India is effectively a colony of China. We are exporting all the primary products, or the products at the low end of the value chain, whereas China is selling us all the manufactured products, and nowadays increasingly high-tech products as well. Is India effectively a colony of China, and what can we do about it?
So the answer is clearly no. I think it's more of rhetoric. So the question I can frame in a different manner. Was 5 years ago India a colony of the US? Was 50 years ago India a colony of the European nations? And if India is a colony, is Japan, Germany, Russia, and several other European nations colonies of China simply because they are the largest trading partner? I think we are mixing things. Also, let me give you a sense of perspective. China is our largest trading partner. That is true. It's about 8% of our trade, but it is 3% of our GDP. What significance is there? Is China everywhere? Now you may argue it's there in critical sectors. We are going to throw them out of all critical sectors. But teddy bears, panda, stuffed panda, toys, toothbrush, toilet paper, etc. This is not important. Let China, if Chinese goods are cheap, you use them, there is no problem. You make yourself competitive, or question the financing of the Chinese corporations, which is in fact state finance. And that's a different debate. Now, is India a colony of China because of a trade deficit? Is India a colony of China because of a large trading, because it imports from there? I don't think so. I think
no, because the pattern of trade which we have with China, which is a classic characteristic of a metropolitan and the colony trade pattern, that you are exporting all the primary products, and the metropolitan center is exporting you the manufactured products.
I don't think so. I think these are yesterday's discussions. I think India's corporate sectors has to up its game, and these can be, if not reversed, a balance can be achieved. I don't see this. I think, Abhinav, this sounds to be more like a narrative. And it's a narrative that constantly puts India, because what India is doing, several other countries are also doing. It's not a big deal. You need to differentiate the character of the trade, which needs to be corrected, and it has been openly discussed also. And this has been discussed not just with India and China, but with US and China as well, UK and EU and China. So these trade discussions are underway. They will continue. But to completely say that India is a colony of China, I'm not sure. Is Africa a colony of China? I don't know. Is Russia a colony of China? I'm not so sure. Russia gives oil. It buys products. So it's the same relationship, resources versus finished product. Defense equipment, perhaps. So, but I don't know. I don't understand this question and the framing. I think we tend to exaggerate. And we tend to dramatize. It's a cool thing, but I think it's incorrect.
But so what exactly is the nature of geoeconomics between India and China?
I think China wants to be a regional hegemon and maybe even a global hegemon. India is saying, no, that's not going to happen. You can play your games elsewhere, not with India. And India possibly is the first, not possibly, definitely is the first country to put these barriers. As far as Huawei goes, Australia was the first country. It was followed by several others, including US, and now India has done it. But in terms of, let us say, apps, in fact, Abhinav, I see this, it's not really a ban, but an exclusion of Huawei from India's 5G as Series 3. It is part of a policy continuum. Series 1 was in 2020 when in June, India banned 59 Chinese apps. In July, it banned another 47 Chinese apps. In September, it banned 118. In November, it banned another 43. So I look at that as Series 1 of this policy. Series 2 was when India, this came in June 2020, when India banned Chinese firms from participating in highway projects, road projects. And now this is Series 3. And I think this is going to increase. And maybe not for small products, but definitely in critical infrastructure. For instance, I think there's going to be a Series 4, 5, 6, 7 around all around critical infrastructure. For instance, I can divide that critical infrastructure argument also into 4 parts. Let us say the first is physical, such as ports, energy, railways, defense. Second is virtual, 5G included, but also internet, technology, broadband. Third is systemic, banking, finance. You should know that much better. To have a Chinese company become a large bank in India, how critical that's going to be. And fourth, in other areas, let us say space, nuclear, and coming out from this Wuhan virus, healthcare. So I think one by one, you need to look at this exclusion of Huawei as part of a policy continuum of the past and which will carry on in the present, unless China reforms. To my mind, I don't think it's in quite a mood to reform right now, even though it is being cornered the world over. I think that blasé, that arrogance, I think Xi Jinping overplayed his cards. He also played those cards a little early. He should have waited for 3 years more or 5 years. He could have had the whole world by its vitals. He was in too much of a hurry, too much of a rhetoric. I think there are problems within China, domestic problems, which he wants to, like in 1984, create enemies outside. In that process, I think China has sort of cornered itself, put itself into some sort of a place where nobody wants to deal with this country. It's a rogue nation. And sooner or later, it will be called as such.
No, why are you calling China rogue nation again and again? So this is the second time you're calling China rogue nation. If you could elaborate upon that.
What is a rogue nation? A rogue nation, the technical definition of a rogue nation is a country that creates security issues around the world. It could be in its immediate neighborhood. So North Korea is a rogue nation when it comes to South Korea and Japan. It could be in the region, like China is doing in the South China Sea, India, Russia, Australia, that Belt and Road Initiative, it's full of debt trap diplomacy. It's behaving in a roguish manner. That is what is known as a rogue nation. It's not that Tom Cruise film. It's actually a technical term, and I can see China steadily, aggressively, and sort of inevitably moving towards that whole called rogue nation. It has to control itself, otherwise it will be a global outcast. It may be a large outcast, it may be a huge trader, but at some point the world is going to say no, enough. And a roguish behavior by small time states is one thing. Roguish behavior by the large state like China is another.
But China would say that US is the biggest and the most important roguish nation in the world. So is it just the way we are looking at? Maybe we are biased against China, as China's wolf warriors these days are going around and saying the same thing.
I've heard this argument too, and US has deserves those name calling, and not only China, even Russia. China and Russia are together on this in terms of a stance vis-a-vis the US. But the US, the roguery of US, if at all, I think it was confined to Latin America in some places, some oil countries in the initial, and now it's got sort of smoothened out. I think this power does something to nations. And when America became a great power, perhaps some of them couldn't deal with it, and Nicaragua, for instance, and it behaved in a manner that was not befitting the security, in creating a security, even despite being in the Security Council. Now China says it's our turn. So, but by then the world has moved on, and the world is saying too late, we are not going to take this. As a result, you have the Indo-Pacific, the Quad alignment, new alignments are coming. The United Nations is becoming toothless and useless, and new alignments are coming. So India was invited to G7. India is going to be part of Quad. There are whole new alignments coming, and whether you like it or not, most of them are there to counter the aggressiveness of China. I wouldn't call it an assertive nation anymore, as many thinkers do. I think it's an aggressive nation, and I think it's moving towards becoming a rogue nation. Let me say that for the fifth time.
So basically, perhaps you're looking at containment 2.0, this time directed towards China. But is it even possible to contain China? Because unlike Soviet Union, which was an autarky, which was a closed nation, China is very well integrated with the world.
So I don't know about the containment theory, in the sense, yeah, I know the theory, but I'm not sure whether containment is the objective here. I think protection, it's a defensive out. China is the aggressor. China is a strong country. So I think these new alignments are more to manage that aggression of a large country, large powerful nation. A nation that should be respected for removing poverty, by the way. A nation that should be respected for increasing the standard of living of its people. Yeah. A nation that should be respected for being on the cutting edge of several technologies, artificial intelligence, telecommunications, robotics, space. So all that, China deserves all that respect and more. To be able to do so with a population of 1.5 billion is no mean task. But respect on one side and your aggression on the other will not be tolerated. So yes, we respect you, but you cross a line and that respect turns into contempt. That contempt turns into disgust. You will see companies, you will see consumers in the middle. You saw them, by the way, in the middle of Galwan, how consumers were rejecting China, how companies refused to trade, how new capacities were built up. So so China may ride it out for 1 year, 2 years, maybe 3. But at some point, countries will say enough is enough. Australia will pay the price now. So Australia has made China angry. So an angry China will now scrooge Australia, is the dominant discourse. Right? Okay, deal with it. You manage yourself. And at some point, the world will come together to engage more with Australia. More and more people are buying Australian wine, for instance. After China set barriers against Australian wines, and it was the biggest importer of Australian wines in the world. And overnight, it raised tariff barriers, etc. So now the people in America are drinking Australian wine. So these kind of new solidarities towards a more civil, a more humane, a more democratic, a more values-based trade will come up. You will see that coming in EU shortly.
Yeah. So my final question to you, sir, is how do you see the future of economic relations between India and China playing out, especially in the light of this entire Belt and Road Initiative, the CPEC, which apparently is going nowhere, and India has been at the forefront of opposing these initiatives by China?
First, I think China will be forced to reform. It will do it in a way that is blasé. It doesn't want to lose face. And I think increasingly India is not going to give it the space. It's not going to manage their loss of face anymore. I think we've done enough. We know it doesn't work. So India will have to stand strong. And it is, whether it's on the border or whether it is in the policy space, which I just mentioned to you, 5G, roads, and going forward in other critical infrastructure. Second, I think the trade balance, if China wants to engage not only with India, but with US, with EU, with other countries, this negative trade balance will have to balance out. It will have to become more equal. Third, I think until China behaves, there is going to be, you see, China is now a risk in the boardrooms of countries. You are going for a deal with China. You are setting up a university with China. You are setting up a scholarship, a think tank, a Confucius Institute with China. And suddenly, China becomes aggressive and attacks. It wants territory. It wants intrusion into your data. It wants to steal your intellectual property. It becomes an enemy. Or at least we don't like to use the word enemy. It begins to behave like an enemy nation. What do? You say, okay, know this, know that. What happened to that deal that was happening? What happened to that Confucius Institute? What happened to that China deal that you were going to tie up with? So suddenly in the boardrooms, and I've heard this from several boards, the conversations are that we need to decouple from China. China is cheap. I think Jindal is going to reduce its dependence on Chinese steel over the next 2 or 3 years. There are several other companies that are doing it in India, but more so the world over. So China suddenly is a risk. It's a risk to whom? To the bonuses of the CEO, to the share price of the company, to the market capitalization of investors. These investors are going to kill you if you go halfway into a deal and are forced to revert, simply because a rogue nation behaves the way it is. It is being forced to, it's being compelled to behave them. So I see in the boardrooms a global withdrawal from China. Now, China is an opportunity. For instance, you take Germany. It's almost like the tail wagging the dog, where the corporations are saying that we will sell our cars, our robots, our equipment, etc., because China is a nice, cozy, cushy market. But at some point, when China crosses a line, and when US puts the pressure on Europe, including Germany, what is going to happen to all these car makers? Where are they going? They will have to diversify. So my sense is that unless China reforms, which is the first thing I said, there is going to be a decoupling. The decoupling is not a G to G. It's G to G will only lay out the broad contours. The bigger decoupling is going to be C to C, company to company, where you will say, no, I'd rather pay a little premium and buy something more expensive than that tomorrow we become vulnerable to this demon. So I think China will have to rephrase. At this moment, it doesn't look like it's going to reform. But give it 3 to 5 years. If it continues, you will see, you save this talk and show it after 2 or 3 years, you will see these words will come true.
Definitely, sir. Definitely, sir. Anyways, going on the YouTube, so everyone will save it and keep it. And then we will come back to you and say, you are the first one to say this thing. But thank you, sir, for the wonderful insights. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And thank you for coming to the show.
Thank you, Abhinav. Delighted to be here. Namaste.
And thank you, audience, for listening to us. Please subscribe to the channel and join as the member if you like. Hoping to see you again soon. Thank you.